another guy that knows what he's doing with big fish. We got on the line from Tactical Bassin, the founding member of Tactical Bassin, Mr. Matt Allen. Matt, welcome.
What's going on, guys? Corey, Joey, how are ya?
Good. How you doing, sir?
We're doing good, man.
Good. I see you're growing your apocalypse beard there, huh?
I'm working on it, man. Nobody's making me cut it yet. We'll see how much longer this can go.
Yeah. Well, you know, Corey, we're hoping to get Tim today too. I know he's been really busy, so we're lucky to have Matt Allen. For those of you who don't know, which I can't imagine people don't know. But Tactical Bassin really covers everything for the advanced angler and some beginning stuff too. But you guys bring us YouTube content that's almost unrivaled, and some great stuff from Swimbaits to tiny little finesse stuff. And you've been doing a lot of traveling. Here's your time to plug Tactical Bassin, Matt. Tell us what it's all about, huh?
Well, I guess the gist of what we do, you know, it's been going on almost 11 years now. And it simply started as wanting to give back to the fishing community. You know, there's a lot of information out in the marketplace. There's a lot of people teaching, but not very many people are teaching all of it, or at least they weren't 10 years ago. So we wanted to come out and just speak the truth about fishing, at least the way that we saw it. You know, right or wrong, it was going to be honest. And that's what we've maintained ever since. So it's 3 videos a week teaching on all sorts of subjects related to fishing.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, Matt and Tim, you guys have really involved your families the last couple of years, which has been really cool. I know your wife and Tim's wife are just hammer fishermen, right?
They really are. It's incredible. Both of them are amazing anglers in their own right. Both of them hold world records. They both hold smallmouth world records. They are unbelievable anglers on their own, totally separate of us.
And your wife just got a new boat, correct? You guys just got that set up, right?
Yeah, she just got a new boat a few months ago, and a new older boat. We got her in the Champion family, and then spent the winter and the first part of this whole COVID thing just completely gutting that boat and updating it with new electronics, all that stuff, just to get it all dialed in.
Well, you know, these guys are really good fishermen and awesome teachers, but great people as well. Just a little personal story. I blew a lower unit last fall practicing for a tournament, and Matt scrapped his Matt and his wife Cece scrapped their fishing day to just come hang out with me and help me not be too throwing myself a big pity party. Matt, you hung out with me for like 3 hours before my partner was able to get the trailer. So thank you for that. And you know, you guys are great people as well as great fishermen and educators too.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. That's just what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I know you guys have been traveling a lot the last couple of years. I know you're big into chasing those big brown fish around the spawn up north. Can you tell me about some of your travel you've done this year, or you know, maybe a favorite story from years past?
Oh, sure. We just got back. I just got home. I fished Clear Lake a couple of days ago for the first time in months. We have been up north fishing Wisconsin and Michigan for several months, and it was unbelievable. Probably the most interesting part of this trip, because we went a little bit later than we have in years past. Most guys get out there, you know, early pre-spawn. That's when you're going to catch those great big smallmouth, and the timing just didn't work this year. Obviously, this whole year has been crazy for everybody. So we were locked down. We couldn't even get there. So we got there in the middle of the spawn, which was not when we've typically fished. So we went on this mission to find pre-spawn fish later in the season. And it was an awesome journey. We should have filmed the entire thing. That experience of getting out on the big water, we were fishing Lake Michigan for the most part. And guys know that if you get there in early May, you know, you catch those big waves of pre-spawn fish coming in. But most people don't know that you can be there in June, even July. And if you're crazy enough and willing to run far enough offshore to go places that bass boats just do not belong, that all across that lake, there are waves of fish that come in pre-spawn all the way into middle of summer. So that's what we were doing. You know, we were making 10 and 15 mile runs offshore, 20 mile runs, just out on that, essentially an ocean, but catching these just untapped fish. And what's so fun up there is that you spend all that time trying to get to them, but once you actually get there, you might as well be fishing in a farm pond. No one fishes for these things. So they would come huge distances to eat a bait. We had several different fish over 6 pounds that we saw come huge distances. One of them we followed with the boat. I got behind, she weighed 6.08. I got behind that fish. I spooked her and I could see her probably 30 feet of visibility, and she was only in about 12 feet of water. And she started to run from the boat. And I started following that bass with the boat. And I discovered that if she got right to the limit of my line of sight, I could still keep an eye on her and she would slow down. And we followed that fish for 7 or 8 minutes before she got far enough away and calm enough that she just stopped. And she just parked out there on a rock flat, fired a tube a good 40 or 50 feet ahead of her, and she went straight to it, popped once, and she ate that thing. And there's nowhere else in the world that fish behave like that. You know, that Great Lakes fishing, if somebody hasn't done it, if you ever get the chance, it's incredible. We all catch fish. We all get a shot at catching big fish, but to do it in clear water where you can spend minutes looking at a fish and watching its behavior and to watch its behavior change and capitalize on it, there's nowhere else that you can do that. That is wild. So we had a blast up there.
Yeah, Matt, that's really incredible. That's an incredible story about a big fish and big water. You better be confident in your equipment to be making those runs. Yeah. I know, and part of that is you guys had a great stretch of weather while you were there.
Yes.
You talked about catching the 6-pounder on the tube. I know you guys were throwing some small swim baits. Can you talk about some of the baits you were using up there besides the tube?
Yeah, so we actually got on amazing, exactly what you said, small swim bait bite, throwing 2 baits. We were throwing a 3.8 and a 4.3 Keitech on our head, on the tactical Finesse swim bait head. And then we were also throwing a Megabass dark sleeper. And both of those were just phenomenal. This trip, that dark sleeper was out of this world. I mean, I wore out a pile of dark sleepers by the time that trip was over. It was amazing how many fish ate those things. And for such a cheap little swim bait, you know, they don't cost anything and they last 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 bites before you start having trouble with them. They're awesome.
It's amazing. Those dark sleepers were, they were a sleeper for a little while. And then some particular channel on YouTube started talking about them. And then all of a sudden it exploded. Like it's amazing how cool those little baits are, and they sold good, but you guys did that. I can't remember the first videos you guys did on those things, and we sold the fire out of them. And I don't even know, I haven't checked the site, but we could not keep them in stock enough. We still do, but they're cool little baits. You guys haven't checked them out, but it's amazing just after you guys did that video how many we sold those things.
Yeah, you know, I've said it a lot this week, but that's a bait I wrote off as you know, something goofy, which I do all the time, and it bites me in the butt. Mm-hmm. And the dark sleeper has really turned into an incredible finesse swim bait that you can throw on a little heavier gear, keep it on the bottom, and it's proven to be you know, something you can catch all 3 main species of bass on all over the country, from you know, California to Florida to the middle of the Great Lakes. And so awesome taking us through that. Matt, I do, you know, it's just lighting up with customer or viewer questions right now, and I do want to get to some of those. The Jolly Green Giant says, "Hey Matt, I'm from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and just wanted to say I love tactical bass and thank you." So just a comment of appreciation there. But we got some questions here too. Jay Ruff asks, what rod do you suggest for swim baits and reaction baits? I mean, I know that's a broad question. Maybe you could talk a little bit about it.
That is a broad question. It really depends. When you're saying a swim bait, how big of a bait you're talking about. If you're talking about, you know, a giant swim bait rod, a big glide bait rod, a big, like a Huddleston rod, an 8 or 10 inch soft swim bait rod, that's a very, very dedicated rod. The Loomis 966 is the rod that I have found to be the most universal for doing that, because I can throw a giant glide and a giant soft bait on the same rod. And that is very, very hard to find. On a budget, the Dobbins Fury 806 is a phenomenal option. Now, if you're talking smaller swim baits, paddle tail swim baits, sort of like the things we're talking about right now, that's a whole nother animal. You can get away with that on almost any medium to medium heavy rod, as long as it's a little bit longer rod. So 7 foot, 7.2, 7.4, somewhere when you hit that fish, you're actually going to load up a lot of rod. And that length, that extra length is extremely forgiving. When those fish come up and try to thrash and shake, that extra length will absorb those head shakes and it'll keep those fish pinned.
Very cool.
Very cool. And that's just one thing. I mean, Matt pointed out there as he's doing it. Like when you watch you guys' stuff, they're not going to give you just like they're not a rod that they're brand, they're loyal or anything like that. These are ones they truly believe in, and they're going to give you the best rod, and then also the budget option and their options. So you guys can, depending on what your budget is and what your skill level is, you can have different options. So I guess a shout out to you guys for just how you guys deliver the content and suggestions for those guys. And another question from the audience is Bishop Vu. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. Matt, what's your number one go-to bait if you had to choose only one lure?
Oh, man.
I know. I was like, that's going to be a tough one.
So that has actually changed in recent years. In the past, I would have said it was a paddle tail swim bait. Now I would say that it's probably a deep crank. If I could only have one bait, you can almost always force feed a crankbait because you can present it so many different ways.
Okay, so Matt, that's an interesting segue into a product that I know is near and dear to your heart, something you developed. But I want you to talk about the way you fish a deep crank, because for so many of us, it's a hucket. I've fished a lot of deep cranks with Corey, burning. But you and Matt fish a deep crank very aggressively, and specifically, you worked with River to Sea the last couple of years to develop a crank. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we developed the Tactical DD, and I actually did grab one. This is the bait. The Tactical DD was because we needed to fill a niche in the market. There's so many crankbaits out there, but so many different crankbaits do different things. A lot of crankbaits, all of the most popular crankbaits on the market, are designed, whether it was intentional or not, they're designed to be successful in warmer water. They're wider wobbling baits. They move a lot of water. They make a ton of commotion, and they shine in warm water. There are not a lot of really, really good options for something that we call speed cranking, and it's something we do in really cold water. We're not the first people to do it. We won't be the last people to do it. It is incredibly effective, and if you don't do it, you should be doing it. So essentially what we wanted is a bait that is primarily presented in really clear water-driven colors. Not completely. We did some different options that would fish in murkier conditions, but the ideal place for it is that cleaner water. 2 feet of visibility on up is where you want to be, because you're going so fast that the fish have to be able to dial in on it at the last second. So in truly muddy water, it's tough on them. But anything short of that, it's amazing. So what we do with these baits is we speed crank. We throw them on a 7-to-1 or an 8-to-1, and we turn that handle fast, just as fast as you can go. But then we pause, burn, 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 pause, burn, pause, burn, 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 pause. And it's a complete break in the cadence. So you might crank 20 feet and then stall, and then 2 feet stall, 5 feet stall, 40 feet stall. But what will happen, even in cold water, fish have this core response. When you've got a bait that triggers that core response, they have no choice but to come after that thing. It's truly a core response. It's beyond a feed response. They just let loose and come full speed trying to catch up to it. And when they're coming full speed and that bait pauses, they destroy it. I mean, it just triggers something on the inside. So we wanted a bait that we could get deep, but was small enough that you could fish it all over the country. So it's not a giant bait by any means. I mean, you see it compared to my hand. It's way smaller than the typical summertime crankbaits. It's tighter actioned. It's a very, very loud rattle, but it's a very specific tone that we were looking for that really shines in those cooler water temperatures. Now, I have been amazed on this trip cross country that we just wrapped up. I actually threw it on the Tennessee River in the middle of the spawn, post spawn, and caught a pile of fish on it. And that was honestly a happy accident. We really wanted a bait dialed for cold water fishing for the half of the year where you've got a shot at catching a monster bass. We wanted a bait for that time. The fact that it's catching good fish the rest of the year, we'll take it. That's awesome too. But that was what we were going for, is a bait when a guy's tired of throwing a Ned rig, a tube, drop shotting because the water is 42 degrees. Stop doing that. Pick up a crankbait on an 8-to-1 reel and turn that handle faster than you've ever turned it. And you will be amazed that bass do not behave the way that we all thought they behave.
So Matt, you spoke to a couple of questions that we got here from viewers. SD Tato 2017 asks, are you throwing your custom DDs during summer? And the answer is yes. And,
yes.
and let me kind of piggyback on that. A couple of questions. Is there a water temperature that's too cold to be speed cranking like you're talking about? And also, can you go? I know you and Matt throw specific tackle when you're employing this technique. Can you talk about that as well?
Sure. So as far as too cold of water goes, there might be, but I have not found it. We have caught fish going full speed in open water in the high 30s. And I'm not talking small fish. I'm talking 8 to 12 pound fish that are eating the crankbait 3 feet from the rod tip in 35 feet of water because they charged all the way to the boat to catch up to it in water that traditional thinking would have you believing you had to fish a bait as slow as physically possible. It is a completely different approach to targeting these fish. As far as equipment, yes, it's also very, very specific. Typically, I throw it on braid to leader because when I start and stop, I want that bait to start and stop. If you're throwing it on mono or fluoro, you've got that stretch in the line. So when you stop, there's lag time where that bait, it may slow down, but it doesn't truly park. It doesn't just stop and go, stop and go. So if you can get away a really light braid, like a 15-pound braid to a 10 or 12-pound leader, you can get that incredible action. Now, when the water clears up, like this year, we had very surprisingly clear water here at home. We had to switch to fluoro to stay on top of that bite. And I'm really not even sure why the fish reacted like that, but they did. So we went to a 12-pound fluoro. But as far as rod goes, that's critical too. We're fishing it on a much softer rod than you would think a standard deep cranking rod. You know, you're not throwing this on a heavy crankbait rod or an extra, like a 10XD rod. That's not what you're doing. You're throwing it on a much softer 7 foot to 7.5 foot medium heavy where that rod truly loads almost all the way to the handle. The Loomis, I believe it's the 906. That's the 7'6". Nope, I'm wrong. It's not the 906, but it's the 7'6" medium heavy Loomis IMX Pro. That is the specific model that I'm throwing that on with a Bantam, either the HG or the XG. So that's either the 7-to-1 or the 8-to-1, depending on just how fast you want to go. But a really, really soft rod because they're not giant hooks by any means. So you want a rod that will load super deep into the blank, and then you're not trying to horse those fish. Once you've got them hooked up, you just lean back on them and you just let them go. Let them pull, let them run where they're going to run. They will wear themselves out. They're in cold water. They already spent their energy trying to get to the crankbait. Just let them wear themselves out. They come up, you net them, and you've got a giant fish on light line in cold water.
Hey, Matt, you were saying catching 8 to 12 pounders on this technique. Are you saying you could catch 8 to 12 pounders, or have you actually caught 8 to 12 pounders?
We've caught a lot of really, really big fish doing this. in recent years, it has outshined a swim bait for us. I mean, a crankbait is an amazing tool to catch giant fish.
Wow.
Now you mentioned the Bantam. I haven't had a chance to fish that reel. Why do you like the Bantam specifically for throwing that crankbait?
That's a good question. I like the Bantam because it's a solid bodied reel. It's super smooth, so I'm getting more distance out of it than I can get with my other reels, which with any crankbait, depth is everything, right? More depth is good depth. If you don't want to go that deep, you can slow it down, but more depth is good depth. So distance is key. I'm getting the longest cast that I can. And then the way that reel's built, it's just bulletproof. So we've been able to crank on those things day after day after day after day, and I see no change in the reel. I'm not wearing them out. I'm not beating them up. I'm cranking on the same set of Bantams that I started with. They're awesome.
So that Bantam's your go-to reel for cranking period right now, it sounds like, or
For the really big crankbaits, I've been throwing that on a Tranks 200 this summer, and I've been really happy with that as well. But for the smaller, either for speed cranking, I also sometimes call it finesse cranking. You know, those smaller size crankbaits, I do all of that on a Bantam now.
Very cool.
You know, Corey, that Bantam, the first time I felt one, I got one in my hands, and I've gotten an opportunity to fish one for a couple of years. It feels like I could run it over with my truck.
It's
I mean,
solid.
it just feels like a bulletproof reel. And speaking of Shimano reels, Matt, I know you and Tim got one of the very few samples of some of the new Shimano products early this year, and were able to fish the new Vanford spinning reel, the Zodias rods, right, and the SLX MGL. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Tell us about it.
Those are all awesome, all three of those. So we just got a really brief opportunity. It just fell in our laps to try some of that stuff. So when we were up fishing on Lake Michigan, I had all three of those items on the boat there for a few days and really got to experience them. I got to take that take that Vanford and put it up against some big smallmouth.
You know, hey, we're cutting to a picture here of it looks like you with the Vanford and just a mega smallmouth.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a little bit of time with that reel. That reel I really enjoy it. It's really smooth. Probably the most interesting thing about it is how solid it feels. When you start to go, that reel is going, and there's no slack in it. There's no play in it. I mean, it's solid and it goes. It's really lightweight. It's really comfortable. It's very smooth. I'm very happy with that reel.
Awesome.
And then to the SLX and the Zodias, I actually had those paired together. So I was throwing a 610 medium heavy Zodias. That's the one that I got to play with that SLX on it. And that was my dedicated dark sleeper rod for a few days. And I lost count of how many fish we caught on that combo. It's really nice. That Zodias, it's got the monocoque rear grip on it. It completely changes the feel of the Zodias. You know, we have preached the last few years about Expride. And the reason why we've preached about that is because throughout the industry, from all sorts of different brands, products will jump out that are just more product than the dollar that's being asked for them. And Expride has been one of those things for years now where it just feels like you're fishing with a $450 rod, but you're not paying $450 for it. That change in the Zodias moves that rod up a lot. I mean, it was already a really good rod. It was a great mid-priced rod that would do a lot for people. It just got a lot more sensitive and a lot more comfortable. I haven't put endless days on it, but the days that I put on it were really fun. I enjoyed that rod a lot.
That's awesome. Well, hey, thank you for telling us about the new products. I wish we had a little more time to chat. I know you and I will have a little bit more time to chat because we talk fishing a lot, but unfortunately we don't have more time to share with the audience. So a big hello and thank you from us at Tackle Warehouse to you and Tim, and of course to Cece and Sierra, your family, and travel safe and good fishing to you, man.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you having me on. We'll see you soon.